My name is Olivia Reed. I am 31 years old. Back when I still trusted my father completely, he had casually dismissed my entire nursing career in front of his business partners during a company picnic 4 years ago, calling it a dead-end job that would never amount to real success, and making sure everyone laughed along. So my ambitions felt small and silly. That moment planted a quiet resentment I tried to ignore for years. Now everything was colliding right here, at the packed community health forum in our small coastal town near Portland, Maine, where my father stood at the podium as a respected local councilman pushing his latest development plans. He had dragged the whole family along and suddenly pointed straight at me in the front row, his voice dripping with that same old contempt, while the entire room of neighbors and officials listened. But this time, I refused to shrink away. I would face whatever came next, with my head held high, no matter how much it cost me. What do you think you would do if your own father tried to erase your worth in front of everyone who matters in your town? Drop a comment below and tell me if you have ever been in a spot where family turned a public moment into something that felt like a knife in the back. I am reading every single one. The forum hall carried the faint scent of salt air drifting in from the nearby harbor as my father leaned into the microphone. He had built his construction company into one of the biggest in the county, and tonight he was pitching a new luxury condo project that would supposedly bring jobs and tax revenue. My mother sat beside me, fidgeting with the program in her lap. My older sister sat on my other side, scrolling her phone like she could not be bothered. I had come because my father had insisted it would look good for the family image, and because as a registered nurse at the Coastal Medical Center, I had actually prepared a short statement about the need for better emergency staffing in our growing town. He was halfway through his speech when he paused, smiled that polished smile the town knew so well, and gestured toward our row. And speaking of community needs, he said, voice booming, with that familiar authority, "My own daughter Olivia here thinks she knows better than the professionals who actually run things. She is just a nurse, folks. Spends her days changing bedpans and following orders. What does she know about real economic impact?" A ripple of awkward chuckles spread through the crowd. Several heads turned my way. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face calm. My mother let out a forced little laugh, the kind she always used to smooth things over and quickly change the subject by whispering to my older sister about the refreshments table afterward. She never once looked at me. My older sister just smirked and muttered something under her breath about how I never knew when to stay quiet. My uncle, Stephen Powell, who had come along because he was visiting from out of town and loved these local events, shifted in his seat, but stayed silent for now. Across the aisle, I spotted my colleague, Brian Foster, a fellow nurse from the medical center who had shown up to support the staffing proposal. He raised an eyebrow at me, clearly surprised by the jab. My father kept going, building on the moment, like it was the best part of his speech. "Look, I love my daughter, but let us be realistic. Nursing is fine for some people, but it does not prepare you to understand big picture decisions. That is why we need experienced leaders like myself making these calls, not someone who clocks in for 12-hour shifts and calls it a career." More laughter, louder this time. A few people I recognized from the grocery store and the harbor market glanced at me with pitying expressions. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but I gripped the edge of my chair and stayed seated. This was not the first time my father had undercut me in public, but something about the way the whole town was watching made it feel heavier than usual. The moderator tried to move the discussion along, but a man in the third row stood up. I recognized him vaguely as someone who had been a patient at the medical center a while back. He cleared his throat and looked straight at my father. "Excuse me, Mr. Reed, but I have to push back on that. Your daughter is not just a nurse. 4 years ago, I was brought into the emergency room after a boating accident out on the bay. The roads were flooded from a storm. Doctors were delayed for nearly 8 hours. She stayed right there with me the whole time, monitoring everything, keeping me calm when I thought I was not going to make it. The room went dead quiet. My father's smile faltered for the first time. He opened his mouth to speak, but the man kept going, voice steady and loud enough for everyone to hear. She held my hand and talked me through the pain. If she had stepped away even once, I probably would not be standing here tonight complaining about condo developments. Whispers started spreading. A few people nodded. Brian Foster stood up from his seat and added, Olivia is one of the best charge nurses we have. She literally saved that patient's life when the rest of the team could not get through the storm. My Uncle Stephen leaned over and muttered to my mother, You know, Barbara, maybe William should have checked his facts before putting her on the spot like that. My mother's forced laugh had vanished. She looked between my father and me, her face tight with sudden uncertainty. But she still did not speak up. My father recovered quickly, waving a hand like it was all a minor misunderstanding. Well, of course we are all proud of Olivia's work at the hospital, he said, but the warmth in his tone sounded rehearsed and thin. That does not change the fact that running a town's future requires more than bedside manner. Yet the energy in the room had shifted. People were looking at me differently now, not with pity, but with respect. My older sister stopped scrolling and stared at the stage, like she could not believe what she was hearing. I sat there, heart pounding, wondering if this unexpected turn was finally going to force my father to see me as more than an easy target. But he was not done. After the forum wrapped, he pulled me aside near the exit, while the crowd milled around grabbing coffee. My mother hovered a few feet away, pretending to study a bulletin board. Olivia, he said quietly, voice low and sharp. Do not think for 1 second that one lucky story erases the bigger picture. You are still just a nurse. You always have been. And tonight, you almost made me look unprepared in front of people whose votes I need. His eyes narrowed the same look he used when I was younger and dared to question his decisions. Next time, keep your opinions to yourself and let the adults handle things. I felt the words land like a slap. But before I could answer, Brian Foster walked up with the man from the boating accident right behind him. Olivia, Mr. Thomas Langley here, wants to thank you properly, Brian said, clapping me on the shoulder. Thomas Langley extended his hand, eyes sincere. I owe you my life. If there is anything I can do to help with that staffing proposal you mentioned, just say the word. My father stood there jaw tight, watching the exchange like it was personally costing him something. My older sister drifted over, arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable with how quickly the narrative had flipped. My Uncle Stephen gave me a small nod of approval, the first real support I had felt from family all evening. The drive home along the dark coastal road was tense and silent at first. My father gripped the wheel tighter than usual. My mother kept glancing in the rearview mirror at me, her expression a strange mix of awkwardness and something almost like regret. But she still said nothing to defend me. My older sister texted furiously in the back seat, probably updating friends about the drama. I stared out at the passing harbor lights, replaying the form in my head. Part of me wanted to believe the recognition would finally change things at home. Another part knew my father too well to hope for that. When we pulled into the driveway of the house, I had grown up in the one my father had expanded twice. With his construction profits, he killed the engine and turned around. This is not over, Olivia. He said the words clipped and final. Tomorrow morning, we are having a family talk about boundaries. You do not get to undermine me in public and walk away like it is nothing. My mother finally spoke, her voice soft but strained. William, maybe we should just let it go for tonight. It was a long event. But my father shot her a look that made her close her mouth again. My older sister rolled her eyes and headed inside without a word. I went to my old room, the one I still kept for visits, even though I had my own apartment closer to the medical center. My phone buzzed almost immediately. It was Brian Foster. Hey, that was wild tonight. The whole staff group chat is buzzing about what happened. A couple of the doctors want to meet with you tomorrow about pushing the staffing issue harder. You okay? I typed back that I was fine, but inside my chest felt tight with a mix of vindication and dread. The forum had exposed something ugly about how my father saw me, and now the town knew a different story. Yet I could already sense the backlash building at home. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like coffee and the usual Sunday pancakes my mother always made when the family was together. My father was already at the table, newspaper open-faced set in that familiar line of disapproval. My older sister sat across from him, sipping orange juice and avoiding my eyes. My Uncle Stephen had stayed over in the guest room and was flipping through his phone, looking like he wished he had driven back to his own place already. My mother set a plate in front of me without quite meeting my gaze, her reaction from the night before still lingering in the way she moved a little too carefully around my father. Olivia, my father started before I could even sit down fully last night, was embarrassing. For all of us. You let that patient story take over my entire presentation. People are going to remember that instead of the development plan that actually matters to this town. His voice carried that calm authority he used when he expected everyone to fall in line. From now on, when we are in public like that, you keep quiet about your little hospital issues. It is not your place. I felt the familiar sting, but this time it mixed with the memory of the forum applause and Brian's text. It was not my place to be attacked either, I said quietly, surprising even myself with how steady my voice sounded. My older sister snorted softly, but my Uncle Stephen looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised. My mother busied herself at the stove, her shoulders tense, like she was waiting for the next explosion. My father set his coffee down, hard enough that it sloshed. Attacked, I was stating facts. You are 31 years old and still playing nurse, like it is some noble calling. Meanwhile, I have built something real here. You could have joined the company years ago. But no, you chose that. The words hung there heavy and familiar. But now they felt different after the public recognition. Before anyone could respond, the doorbell rang. My mother went to answer it, and a moment later Brian Foster stepped into the kitchen holding a folder. Sorry to drop by unannounced, he said, nodding politely to everyone, but the hospital administrator saw the forum footage online already and wants Olivia to lead a quick community update meeting this afternoon. Seems your story went a little viral locally. My father's face went rigid. My older sister's mouth actually fell open a fraction. My mother paused mid-step, her reaction shifting from discomfort to visible surprise. My Uncle Stephen let out a low whistle. I looked at the folder Brian offered me and felt a small, sharp thrill run through me. The public exposure my father had tried to use against me was now opening doors he could not control. But as I reached for the folder, I caught the look in my father's eyes, cold and calculating. And I knew this was only the beginning of whatever he planned to do next to put me back in what he considered my place. I reached for the folder, my fingers brushing the edge, just as my father's cold stare locked onto us both. The kitchen felt smaller with everyone crowded around the table, but I kept my focus on Brian's steady expression, while my father cleared his throat loud enough to cut through the moment. Olivia! My father said, his voice carrying that same polished authority he used at the forum, only sharper. Now you are not seriously considering leading some community update meeting. That folder is nothing but a distraction from what really matters in this town. You are still just a nurse who got lucky with one patient story, And now you want to parade that around like it makes you an expert. The words landed hard laced with the kind of contempt that made my chest tighten. He turned to Brian without missing a beat. No offense to you or the hospital, but my daughter does not need to be the face of anything right now. It would only confuse people about who actually drives progress around here. Brian paused, folder still halfway extended, and I felt the familiar heat of embarrassment creep up my neck again. My older sister leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, a small smirk playing on her lips like she was enjoying the show. My mother set down the coffee pot with a clatter, her face flushing as she looked between us. For once, she did not stay quiet or force a laugh. "William, that is enough," she said, her tone carrying a rare edge of frustration. The man from last night was telling the truth, and half the town already saw it online. Maybe we should listen, instead of jumping down her throat. It was the closest she had come to pushing back in years, but my father just shot her a look that made her press her lips together and turn back to the sink, shoulders stiff. My father ignored her completely and leaned forward, eyes fixed on me. "See what you started. Even your mother is getting pulled into this nonsense. You think saving one guy during a storm gives you the right to step on my work? I have spent 20 years building respect in this community, and you are not going to undo that with some viral hospital tale." He pulled out his phone right there at the table, tapping the screen with deliberate movements. "I am calling Councilman Hargrove right now. He owes me a favor, and we will get ahead of this before it spirals any further." The room went still, except for the faint sound of his phone ringing on speaker. My Uncle Stephen, who had been quietly observing from the corner, finally spoke up. "William, maybe give the girl some credit. That story is already everywhere on the local pages. People are calling her a hero, not a distraction." My father waved him off without even glancing his way, the call connecting as a voice answered on the other end. I stood there, folder now in my hands, feeling the weight of everything shifting under me. One part of me wanted to walk out and never look back, but another part knew walking away would only prove his point, that I could not handle real pressure. Brian shifted uncomfortably, but stayed put. "Olivia, the administrator, is serious about this afternoon. They have already had 20 calls from residents asking about the staffing issues you mentioned. This could actually get the emergency funding approved faster than we hoped." His words hung there like a lifeline, but my father's conversation on the phone drowned them out. He was smooth, convincing, telling Councilman Hargrove that the form had been misinterpreted and that any follow-up meetings should focus on the development plans instead. When he hung up, he looked straight at me again, satisfaction flickering in his eyes. "Handled. No need for you to play spokesperson today or any other day." My mother wiped her hands on a dish towel, her earlier spark of frustration fading into something quieter, almost resigned. But she stepped closer to me and murmured under her breath, "We can talk later. Just the two of us. This is getting out of hand." It was a small gesture, different from her usual smoothing over, yet it still left me wondering how long that support would last, once my father turned up the heat. My older sister rolled her eyes and muttered, "Dad is right, Olivia. You always have to make everything about you." I clutched the folder tighter, my mind racing through the possibilities. The hospital meeting was in 3 hours, and part of me knew showing up could open doors I had worked years to crack. But my father was already texting someone else, his thumbs flying across the screen with purpose. "I have contacts on the hospital board, too," he said casually, like it was nothing. "One quick call, and they will remember who funds half their charity events. You do not want to force my hand on this, Olivia. Not after last night." The threat sat there between us, heavy and unspoken in its full meaning. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of tension. I retreated to my old room to change, But my phone would not stop buzzing with messages from colleagues, and even a couple of local reporters who had seen the forum clip. Brian texted again, confirming the meeting was still on, and that several patients had shared similar stories of my care during storms or accidents. It felt validating in a way that almost made me smile, yet every buzz reminded me of the storm brewing downstairs. When I came back down, my father was waiting in the living room coat on keys in hand. "I am driving you to the hospital myself," he announced, voice leaving no room for argument. "We are going to have a real talk on the way about priorities." My mother hovered near the door, her expression a mix of worry and that fresh uncertainty from earlier. She touched my arm lightly as I passed. "Be careful what you say, honey. He is not used to being challenged like this." It was not quite defense, not quite warning, but it was something new, and it left me unsettled. My older sister had already left for her own plans, clearly uninterested in the fallout. My Uncle Stephen gave me a quick thumbs up from the couch, but I could tell even he sensed the air thickening. In the car, my father did not waste time. The coastal road wound along the harbor as he gripped the wheel, his words coming out measured and cutting. "You have always been difficult, Olivia. Choosing nursing over joining the company was your first mistake. Now you are embarrassing me publicly, and for what? So you can feel important for a few days. I built this life for all of us, and you are tearing it down with your little hero act." Each sentence felt like another layer of the reputation he had tried to pin on me, the one that painted me as unreliable secondary, never quite enough. I stared out the window, jaw tight, refusing to let him see how deeply it still cut after all these years. We pulled into the medical center parking lot, just as a small group of staff and a local news van came into view. Brian was waiting near the entrance, waving me over, but my father killed the engine and turned to face me fully. "Last chance," he said, voice low and final. "Skip this meeting. Tell them you are stepping back for family reasons. Do that, and we move past last night, like it never happened." The offer hung there, tempting in its simplicity, yet I knew accepting it would mean shrinking back into the role he had always assigned me. Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a new text from an unknown number, local paper here. "We would love your side of the forum story for tomorrow's front page. Any comment on your father's development plans versus hospital needs?" My father glanced at the screen, and his face hardened further. "See, this is what you invited. One wrong word today, and everything I have worked for starts crumbling because of you." The pressure in the car felt suffocating, the kind that made every breath deliberate. I slipped the phone into my bag, heart hammering, and reached for the door handle. Part of me wanted to walk into that meeting and finally speak my truth, but another part could already see the irreversible cracks forming in my family, the kind that might never mend no matter what I chose. As I stepped out, Brian jogged over, excitement clear on his face. "The administrator is thrilled you are here." A couple of board members showed up too after seeing the clip. This could be huge for staffing. Behind me, I heard my father's car door open as well, his footsteps following me across the lot. Whatever happened inside that building, I knew he would not let it end quietly. And as we crossed the threshold together, my phone buzzed again with another message, this one from my mother. "He is angrier than I have seen in years. Please do not push him too far today." The words sat heavy in my gut, a warning wrapped in concern that only made the stakes feel higher. The room waited for my response to the opening question, but all I could feel was the ticking clock of everything about to explode. The administrator, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Elena Vargas, whom I had worked with on dozens of shifts, smiled encouragingly from the head of the table. "Olivia, we all saw the forum clip, and the community is buzzing. Can you walk us through why emergency staffing shortages hit so hard during storms here on the coast, and what immediate changes you would recommend?" Before I could even open my mouth, my father stepped forward from the back of the room, his polished smile firmly in place, but his eyes locked on me with that familiar cutting edge. "If I may interject as a longtime supporter of this medical center," he said smoothly, voice booming with the same authority he used at council meetings. "My daughter Olivia here is just a nurse. She means well, of course, but let us not turn one patient anecdote into policy. I have built developments that bring real revenue to this hospital through donations and tax dollars. We should focus on sustainable funding, not emotional stories that could derail bigger projects." The words sliced through the room like a blade, and I felt my cheeks burn as several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Brian Foster stood up beside me, folder still in hand, his face tight with disbelief. "Mr. Reed, with respect, Olivia has years of hands-on experience in exactly these situations. That patient's story is not an anecdote. It is proof of what happens when we are understaffed." My Uncle Stephen had somehow slipped into the back of the room unnoticed, and he nodded once in silent support, but it was Thomas Langley, the man from the boating accident, who had followed us in quietly, who cleared his throat and spoke next. "I am that patient, sir. Your daughter kept me alive for 8 long hours when no one else could reach the hospital. Calling her just a nurse after that feels pretty dismissive to those of us who owe her everything." The room murmured. Dr. Vargas raised a hand for quiet, but my father was not finished. He turned directly to the board chair, ignoring everyone else. "Gentlemen, ladies, I called earlier to remind you of the generous contributions my company has made over the years. Let us not let one family disagreement overshadow the real economic drivers here. Olivia can share her thoughts privately, but publicly pushing this now would only confuse voters about priorities." His tone was calm, professional, yet every syllable carried the same contempt he had thrown at me my whole adult life, the one that said I would never measure up to his version of success. I stood there, heart pounding, the text from the unknown contact burning in my mind. Something inside me snapped, not with anger, but with a quiet, steady resolve I had never felt before. Actually, I said, my voice clearer than I expected, "I will speak now. 4 years ago, during that storm, I stayed because lives depend on it. We lost 2 patients that night due to delays, and it does not have to be that way. We need 3 additional full-time nurses per shift in emergency, plus better storm protocols. The community deserves that regardless of any development plans." The words came out steady, and when I finished, several board members were nodding. Thomas Langley clapped once, and Brian grinned openly. My father's face stayed composed for the cameras in the back, but I saw the flash of pure fury in his eyes, the kind that promised payback. The meeting wrapped with Dr. Vargas announcing they would fast-track the staffing proposal based on the public support already pouring in. As people filed out, shaking my hand and thanking me, my father pulled me aside in the hallway, his grip firm on my elbow. "You just cost this family more than you realize, Olivia," he said quietly, voice low enough that only I could hear. "I have spent decades building respect in this town, and you turned it into a sideshow about your little job. Do not expect any more support from me. No more covering your apartment rent when shifts run long. No more introductions to the right people. You chose this path. Live with it." His words landed like a final deliberate strike, the reputation he had tried to destroy now backfiring on him in ways he could not control. I pulled my arm free, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I never asked for your version of success, Dad. I only asked to be seen for what I actually do." He stared at me a moment longer, then turned and walked out without another word. Brian caught up to me in the parking lot, handing me a fresh printout of the approved next steps. "You did it. The proposal is moving forward, and the local paper wants a full feature on you next week. This is going to change things for the whole department." It felt like a win, the kind I'd worked years for, yet the victory tasted bittersweet as I drove home alone along the darkening coastal road. 2 days later, the family gathered at the house again, but the air was thicker than any storm. My mother had texted me twice, asking me to come her messages, carrying that new mix of worry and hesitation she had shown since the forum. When I walked in, my older sister was already at the kitchen table, arms crossed, while my uncle Stephen sat quietly in the corner like a reluctant referee. My father stood at the head of the table, papers spread out in front of him. "Olivia," he started immediately, voice carrying that same sharp authority. "This ends now. Your little stunt at the hospital has people questioning my development plans. The board chair called me yesterday, and I had to smooth things over. From this point forward, you keep your nursing opinions out of public view, or we are done pretending this family still works together." My mother sat beside him, her hands twisting a napkin in her lap. For the first time in years, she did not jump in to smooth things over or force a laugh. Instead, she looked at me directly, her expression a complicated blend of pride and fear. "William, she saved a man's life. The town is talking about that, not your condos. Maybe it is time we supported her instead of tearing her down every chance we get." It was the strongest stand she had ever taken yet. When my father shot her a single cold glance, she fell silent again, the conflict clear on her face. My older sister rolled her eyes. "Mom is right for once. But Olivia, you could have just stayed quiet like Dad asked. Now look at the mess." I sat down across from them, the weight of years of these moments settling on my shoulders. "I have stayed quiet long enough. Every time I tried to build something for myself, you called it nothing. Just a nurse. Just not good enough. I am done shrinking, so your reputation stays perfect." The words felt raw and true, and for a moment the kitchen went completely still. My father's jaw tightened the same way it did when anyone challenged his control. "Then you are choosing to walk away from this family's support. Effective immediately. No more help with bills. No more holiday gatherings if you cannot fall in line. I will not have my own daughter undermining everything I built." My uncle Stephen finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "William, this is your daughter we are talking about. She saved a life. That should count for something." My father ignored him completely, eyes never leaving mine. "My decision stands. You made your choice at that meeting. Live with the consequences." My mother reached across the table toward me, her hand hovering but not quite touching her reaction, shifting once more into quiet heartbreak as she realized the rift was widening beyond repair. My older sister stood up and left the room without a word, her loyalty clear. I left the house that afternoon with nothing but my purse and the folder from the hospital. The drive back to my apartment felt longer than usual, the harbor lights blurring through tears I refused to let fall. Over the next few weeks, the staffing proposal passed with strong community backing, and my feature in the local paper brought calls from other hospitals offering better shifts. Professionally, it was a turning point I had dreamed about for years. People in town stopped me at the market to thank me, and Brian even joked that I had become the face of coastal emergency care. It was the partial victory I had fought for, the recognition that finally proved my work mattered. But the cost was steeper than I had imagined. My father kept his word. No more invitations to family dinners. No more quiet financial help when overtime dried up. No more pretending we could bridge the gap. My mother called a few times in secret, her voice torn between guilt and loyalty. But she never fully chose a side, and the conversations always ended with her asking me to just try to make peace someday. My older sister sent one text saying I had ruined things for everyone, then went silent. My uncle Stephen checked in occasionally, the only bridge left, yet even that felt fragile. The family I had known my whole life, fractured in ways that could not be glued back together, leaving me standing on my own 2 feet in a town that now saw me differently, but without the safety net I had quietly relied on for 31 years. Sometimes I sit on my small balcony overlooking the bay and wonder if the price was too high. I gained respect for the work I love, but I lost the illusion that my father could ever see me as more than a footnote in his story. The truth that came out at the forum gave me strength, yet it also exposed how deep the divide had always been. Choosing myself meant walking away from the version of family I had clung to, and that loss still aches on quiet evenings when the phone stays silent.